My name is Alex, and I am 28 years old, an age often associated with a certain level of self-awareness and understanding of one's place in the world. Yet, if you had posed the question to me a mere 30 days ago, querying my perception of my familial unit, my immediate and unhesitating response would have been that we were, at most, a mildly dysfunctional cluster of individuals. The kind of dysfunction that manifests itself in predictable, almost endearing ways, like a recurring, slightly off, key refrain in a familiar song. You know the drill, the subtle, almost imperceptible jabs masked, as well, meaning advice during festive gatherings, particularly egregious during the culinary marathon of Thanksgiving dinner, when the sheer volume of food consumed seemed to amplify every underhanded comment. My mother, a master orchestrator of emotional gymnastics, possessed an uncanny knack for playing overt favorites with my younger sister, Emily, a talent she honed to perfection over decades. And then there was my father, a man perpetually existing in a state of blissful, almost zen, like unawareness, navigating the complex tapestry of our family dynamics, with the serene detachment of a monk, observing a particularly intricate dust bunny. Annoying. Absolutely like a persistent hum from a faulty refrigerator. Unbearable. Not quite, more akin to a chronic, low-grade headache you've learned to live with. We functioned, or at least, we performed the semblance of functioning. We attended the requisite holidays, exchanged the perfunctory pleasantries, and maintained a fragile peace, a delicate ecosystem of unspoken rules and deeply ingrained patterns. I had, in my youthful Navy day, accepted this as our immutable reality. But then, the seismic event that irrevocably altered my perception of our family unit occurred: Emily's wedding. It was not merely a celebration of love, it was a revelation, an epiphany of grand proportions. It was in the gilded halls of that opulent venue, amidst the carefully orchestrated chaos of marital bliss, that the truth, stark and unvarnished, descended upon me with the force of a sudden, torrential downpour. My family, I suddenly understood with chilling clarity, didn't merely engage in the casual, almost benign act of playing favorites. No, their dynamic was far more intricate, far more insidious. They operated under a distinct, unwavering principle: the existence of a designated main character. And here's the rather unsurprising, yet nonetheless painful, spoiler alert: that coveted central role, the spotlight stealing, world revolving around them protagonist. It was unequivocally not me. Not by a long shot. Let me offer a brief, yet essential, backstory to paint a more vivid picture. Emily, my younger sister, is currently 25 years old. To merely state that she has been accorded the treatment of royalty, a veritable sovereign queen, for the entirety of her earthly existence, would be a profound and laughable understatement. Her life has been a meticulously curated tapestry of preferential treatment, laid out with velvet cushions and strewn with rose petals, while the rest of us, primarily me, navigated a more conventional, often thorny, path. This is the very same girl who, upon reaching the tender and tempestuous age of 16, unleashed a full-blown, ear-splitting tantrum of epic proportions, the catalyst for this dramatic display of juvenile fury. My parents, in their infinite wisdom and practical consideration, had gifted me, the responsible elder sibling, a perfectly functional, albeit pre-owned, vehicle for my 16th birthday. Emily, however, upon witnessing this decidedly un-princess-like acquisition, deemed it an affront to her inherent superiority. She, with the unshakable conviction of a true monarch, demanded a brand spanking new car for her own 16th birthday, which, it's worth noting, was still 2 years away. And lo and behold, defying all logic and fairness, guess what transpired? She got it. A shining, pristine, factory-fresh automobile, delivered with a flourish, as if by royal decree. She was, and always had been, the golden child, the infallible princess, the one who could seemingly do no wrong, even when her actions were glaringly, egregiously, undeniably wrong. Me, I was perpetually cast in the thankless role of the older sibling, burdened with the expectation to set a good example. This was, in essence, a subtly insidious code for do everything flawlessly, exhibit impeccable behavior, and receive absolutely zero commendation or praise for your efforts. If, for instance, I managed to secure a commendable B on a particularly challenging test, a grade many would celebrate, my mother would simply shake her head with a resigned sigh, her lips pursed in a silent disapproval that spoke volumes. "Alex," she would intone, her voice laced with a gentle disappointment that somehow felt heavier than outright anger. "You are capable of so much more." The implication hung heavy in the air. A B was merely a stepping stone to an A, and anything less was a missed opportunity, a personal failure. Meanwhile, if Emily, the perennial recipient of academic leniency, somehow managed to scrape by with a C, minus a grade that for anyone else would warrant a stern talking to, it was cause for jubilant celebration. The balloons would emerge, vibrant and buoyant, and a celebratory cake, replete with sugary frosting, would magically materialize, as if she had single-handedly cured a rare disease. This stark dichotomy, this glaring imbalance, was the undercurrent of my entire upbringing, a constant low-frequency hum of injustice that I had, until now, merely accepted as the white noise of family life. Regardless, as the fateful day of Emily's wedding approached, I harbored no illusions of grandeur or expectations of being the undisputed star of the show. That much, at least, was glaringly obvious. It was, after all, her day, a meticulously planned spectacle designed to celebrate her union. And truly, I was content to play the role of the supportive elder sibling, to fade into the background, to offer genuine smiles for the endless photographs, and to navigate the intricacies of the day without inadvertently catalyzing any form of avoidable drama. My aspirations were modest, my expectations carefully calibrated. What I utterly failed to anticipate, what my rational mind simply could not have conceived, was the astonishing extent to which my family would go, the elaborate measures they would employ, to unequivocally, undeniably, and humiliatingly underscore my precise, peripheral position within the intricate hierarchy of our shared bloodline. The subtle, insidious warning signs, like faint whispers on the wind, had begun to manifest themselves early on in the pre-wedding frenzy. The first unsettling tremor occurred when I discovered, quite by accident, that I would not be included in the official wedding party. My initial reaction was a practiced shrug, a well-worn facade of indifference. Fine, whatever, I told myself. Not every bride or groom feels compelled to include their siblings as bridesmaids or groomsmen. Families are diverse, traditions vary. I could rationalize it away. But then, the next piece of information dropped, a small, sharp shard of glass, pricking at the edges of my composure. I learned, through casual conversation, that Emily's childhood best friend, a woman she hadn't seen in years, was in the wedding party. Her co-worker, whom she'd known for barely 6 months, was in the wedding party. Even her fiancé's cousin's girlfriend, a complete stranger to our family, was in the wedding party. All right, I conceded to myself, the sting of exclusion a little sharper now, a dull throb beneath my carefully constructed veneer of nonchalance. But hey, maybe she just wanted to keep things fresh, to inject new energy into her bridal retinue. Perhaps it was a deliberate choice to avoid the clichés of familial obligations. I tried, desperately, to concoct a logical, non-personal explanation. Then came the seating chart, the ultimate arbiter of social standing at any wedding reception. Now, let's be abundantly clear. I harbored no delusion of being seated at the hallowed head table. That sacred space, adorned with elaborate floral arrangements, and reserved for the radiant couple and their chosen few, the inner circle of the wedding party, was clearly not my domain. But my modest expectation, my deeply ingrained assumption, was that I would, at the very least, be seated amongst our immediate family. The individuals with whom I shared a fundamental biological connection, the very same people with whom I had endured countless holidays, celebrated innumerable milestones, and navigated the labyrinthine corridors of shared history for my entire 28 years. My parents, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, these were my people, my tribe. Nope, not even close. The moment I arrived at the grand, meticulously decorated venue, my heart, despite my attempts to temper its expectations, still held a faint flicker of hope for normalcy. I approached the elegantly framed seating chart, my eyes scanning the intricately calligraphed names, searching for my own amongst the familiar surnames. And that's when I noticed it, a peculiar anomaly that sent a cold trickle of apprehension down my spine. My name was conspicuously absent from the clusters reserved for my parents, my beloved aunts, or even my boisterous cousins. No, my name, my very identity, was not just misplaced. My place card wasn't even on the meticulously prepared seating chart at all. A jolt of bewildered disbelief shot through me. This couldn't be right. I was, for all intents and purposes, unassigned, a ghost at my own sister's wedding. A profound sense of disorientation washed over me, a feeling of being utterly erased. I had to approach a bustling wedding planner, a harried young woman with an air of professional efficiency, to inquire about my designated spot. She, with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, consulted her digital tablet, her fingers swiftly navigating through a long list of names. And then, her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, a fleeting flicker of something akin to discomfort passing across her face. She offered me the tightest, most excruciatingly awkward smile I have ever had the misfortune to witness. A smile that screamed I am trapped in a nightmare and desperately trying to maintain composure. "Oh, Alex," she chirped, her voice a little too high, a little too strained. "You're right here!" She extended a perfectly manicured finger, pointing towards a specific spot on the digital diagram. I followed her gaze, my eyes narrowing, my brow furrowing in confusion. And in that precise, agonizing moment, was when the full, humiliating truth slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. My assigned seat was not, I repeat, not within the grand ballroom, the opulent space where dazzling chandeliers cast a soft, ethereal glow over elegantly decorated tables, each laden with gleaming cutlery and overflowing with vibrant floral centerpieces. No, my designated seat was outside the ballroom, as in, literally in the dimly lit hallway, in close proximity to the cumbersome, overflowing coat rack. At first, an involuntary, almost hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. It was such an absurd, almost comical scenario that my brain, in its desperate attempt to make sense of the incomprehensible, immediately jumped to the conclusion that there had to be some colossal, administrative mistake. Like, oh, perhaps they simply ran out of chairs in the main hall and had to temporarily relocate a few overflow guests. Or, surely, this is just a placeholder, a temporary arrangement until they find a more suitable spot for me. But no. The wedding planner's carefully neutral expression, the stiff set of her shoulders, conveyed the undeniable reality that lonely, pathetic little table near the main entrance, bathed in the faint, unsettling smell of mothballs, emanating from people's discarded winter coats. That was my designated seat. Just me, a solitary island in a sea of forgotten outerwear. I turned back to the wedding planner, a frozen, idiotic grin still plastered across my face, my mind stubbornly refusing to fully process the bizarre, almost Kafkaesque reality of the situation. "You're kidding, right?" I managed to choke out, the words laced with a desperate hope that she would burst into laughter and confirm my suspicions. She looked utterly, profoundly uncomfortable, her eyes darting away from mine. "I'm really sorry, Alex," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "But this is where you've been assigned." Assigned. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. It echoed with the chilling finality of a prisoner, being handed their cell block number. or a piece of luggage being tagged for indefinite detention. I wasn't even angry yet. Anger felt too simple, too direct. I was too consumed by a swirling vortex of confusion, a disorienting sensation of unreality. Was this some elaborate, incredibly cruel prank orchestrated by my family? Some bizarre, previously unheard of wedding tradition designed to test the resilience of the elder sibling? I needed answers. And I knew, with absolute certainty, precisely who to demand them from. I found Emily precisely where one might expect a bride to be on her special day, near the bridal suite, a veritable oasis of white satin and nervous energy. She was, as anticipated, utterly basking in the incandescent glow of being the bride, radiating a self-satisfied aura that seemed to eclipse the actual chandeliers. She was encircled by a devoted coterie of her friends, a smiling, fawning audience to her every move. Our mother, predictably, was hovering nearby, her face a mask of saccharine adoration, utterly absorbed in fawning over Emily's voluminous, intricately detailed wedding dress as if it were a sacred relic. Emily, caught in her blissful bridal bubble, finally registered my presence. Her eyes, which had been scanning the room with an almost regal air, landed on me. And then, she plastered on the fakest smile I have ever witnessed, a brittle, unconvincing stretch of her lips that barely touched her eyes. "Oh, hey, Alex," she chirped, her voice dripping with an insincere cheerfulness. "You made it!" As if my attendance was ever in question, as if my very presence was a delightful surprise rather than a given. I held up my pristine, yet now deeply symbolic, place card, my fingers tightening around its edges. "Yeah," I replied, my voice deliberately flat, cutting through her manufactured effervescence. "Quick question. Why is my seat not in the reception hall?" Emily blinked once, twice, a momentary lapse in her bridal composure. Then, unbelievably, she giggled. A light, airy, utterly dismissive little titter that grated on my nerves like fingernails on a chalkboard. She actually giggled. "Oh, that!" she exclaimed, as if referring to some minor, inconsequential detail, a trivial rearrangement of decorative napkins. "Yeah, we had to move a few things around last minute." Her tone implied a whirlwind of logistical challenges, a sudden, unforeseen crisis that necessitated drastic, yet entirely logical solutions. "Aha," I responded, my voice dangerously calm. The very picture of feigned understanding. And I just so happened to be the one who got moved to the hallway. Out of all the hundreds of guests, I was the designated exile. Emily merely shrugged, a gesture of profound indifference that spoke volumes. It was as if this entire conversation was a tiresome, minor inconvenience, barely worth her precious attention. I mean, yeah, we had to prioritize close family at the main tables. My eyes widened imperceptibly. My jaw tightened. I am close family. The words formed silently on my lips, a desperate plea to logic, to reason, to the very bonds of blood that supposedly connected us. Before I could voice this obvious, yet apparently revolutionary, statement, my mother, who had been performing a rather unconvincing impression of someone entirely absorbed in the intricate lacework of Emily's train, suddenly chimed in. Her voice, sickly sweet and laced with a barely concealed warning, cut through the tension. "Now, Alex," she cooed, her hand rising in a placating gesture. "Don't make a scene. It's Emily's special day." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. "I'm not making a scene," I retorted, my voice rising a fraction, abandoning all pretense of calm. "I'm asking why I'm literally sitting with the coats!" And then, then it happened. Emily, with a casualness that bordered on sociopathic, dropped the single line that irrevocably transformed this already surreal event into the single worst wedding I have ever had the misfortune to attend. The words, delivered with a shrug and a fleeting glance, landed like a cold, precise surgical strike, severing the last fragile threads of my familial belonging. "Well," she began, her tone almost apologetic, almost regretful, but with a hard, unyielding core of truth. "You kind of aren't really immediate family anymore." I stared at her, my mind scrambling, trying desperately to decipher the twisted logic behind her statement. The words hung in the air, echoing, distorting, refusing to settle into any coherent meaning. "Excuse me," I managed, the two words barely a whisper, yet vibrating with an incredulous intensity. She shrugged again, the movement accompanied by a delicate adjustment of her veil, as if this deeply personal, deeply hurtful conversation was nothing more than a tiresome interruption to her bridal reverie. "You moved out years ago," she continued, as if reciting a list of inconvenient facts. "You don't come around that often. And you're not married or anything. It's just different now." Each word was a carefully placed brick, building a wall between us, defining me as an outsider, an anomaly, a discardable relic of a past family configuration. I don't even know how to adequately describe the precise sensation, the heavy, suffocating feeling that settled in my chest at that exact moment. It wasn't just anger, though a furious inferno was certainly beginning to flicker to life. It was something heavier, something colder, something infinitely more profound and soul-crushing. It was the crushing weight of utter, definitive rejection. I wasn't immediate family anymore. My crime? The audacity to grow up, to forge my own path, to cultivate a life independent of their suffocating orbit. My perceived failing. The unforgivable sin of not being married, as if marital status was the sole determinant of one's place in the family hierarchy. It was a brutal, unvarnished indictment of my entire existence, a cold declaration that I had failed to adhere to their unspoken, yet rigidly enforced, script for my life. Before I could even formulate a coherent response, before the white, hot rage could fully ignite and unleash itself, another voice, sharp and saccharine, cut into the emotionally charged silence. And that's when I saw her. Emily's mother-in-law. A woman I had barely exchanged more than perfunctory pleasantries with prior to this momentous day. She glided into our tense little tableau, her presence radiating an almost palpable aura of self-importance and thinly veiled malice. The second she stepped into our circle, her gaze sweeping over us with an almost predatory interest, I knew with an instinctive, primal certainty exactly what kind of person she was, not merely by her impeccably tailored suit or her perfectly coiffed hair, but by the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere, the way her eyes gleamed with a predatory glint. She was the quintessential instigator, the kind of individual who not only tolerated drama, but actively relished it, who thrived on the delicious chaos of conflict, and whose very existence seemed dedicated to the art of stirring the pot, adding fuel to every nascent flame. She glanced at me, her lips curving into a slow, knowing smirk, a look of almost theatrical recognition. "Oh," she drawled, her voice a low, throaty purr. "You're Alex." I was wondering who that peculiar seat belonged to. Her gaze lingered on me, a deliberate, calculating assessment that felt utterly invasive. I forced a tight, brittle smile to my face, a grimace that felt more like a contortion. "Yep," I managed, my voice clipped, "that's me. The sibling who apparently doesn't count." Emily's MIL chuckled, a low, guttural sound that lacked any genuine mirth. It was a sound of amusement at my expense, a cruel confirmation of her enjoyment of my predicament. She subjected me to a lingering head-to-toe once over, her expression dripping with a saccharine, almost mocking sympathy that was far more insulting than outright disdain. "Well, you know how weddings are," she purred, her eyes alight with a malicious glee. "Only the most important people get the best spots." And just like that, in the space of that single, seemingly innocuous sentence, everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. A cold, hard certainty solidified in my gut. This wasn't just Emily's doing, born of her perpetual self-centeredness and entitlement. No, this was something far more orchestrated, far more deliberate. Her new mother-in-law, a woman whose true colors were now vividly on display, was unequivocally enjoying this. She was reveling in my humiliation, basking in the perceived power dynamic. And suddenly, every piece of the twisted puzzle fell into place. This wasn't some innocent seating mistake, a regrettable oversight in the dizzying whirlwind of wedding planning. This wasn't the byproduct of bad planning, of logistical blunders.
Oh no.
This was intentional. Every single agonizing detail, from my exclusion from the bridal party to my banishment to the hallway, had been a calculated act, a deliberate assertion of dominance and dismissal. And the moment that profound, undeniable realization settled into the deepest recesses of my being, something fundamental shifted within me. The quiet, compliant Alex, the one who had spent a lifetime diligently setting a good example, the one who had swallowed countless slights and absorbed innumerable injustices, evaporated like mist in the harsh glare of the morning sun. A cold, determined resolve, sharper than any blade, took root in its place. I was not, under any circumstances, going to sit through this wedding quietly, silently enduring this public humiliation. And I most emphatically was not going to depart from this farce without making a statement, a reverberating declaration that would leave an indelible mark on their meticulously crafted illusion of perfection. I took a slow, deep breath, consciously regulating the frantic rhythm of my heart. My fingers, surprisingly steady, tightened around the place card still clutched in my hand, its flimsy cardboard now feeling like a potent weapon. All right. If this was how they, the architects of my perceived insignificance, wanted to play this twisted game, then fine. But they, in their arrogant certainty, had forgotten one crucial, irrevocable truth. I grew up with Emily. I knew her secrets. Not just the superficial ones, the embarrassing childhood anecdotes, but the deeply ingrained, fundamental truths of her character. I knew all the little, venomous things she whispered behind people's backs, the casual cruelties she dispensed when she believed no one was listening. And most importantly, with a surge of cold, strategic satisfaction, I knew with absolute certainty that she harbored a profound, almost visceral hatred for her new mother-in-law. Oh, on the surface, she had perfected the art of the charming facade. She'd smiled sweetly in her face, her eyes wide with feigned admiration, her words dripping with sycophantic praise. But behind closed doors, it was an entirely different story, a narrative woven from threads of disdain and resentment. And right now, in this crowded, expectant hallway, I had a captive audience. The perfect stage for a performance of reckoning. I turned deliberately towards Emily's mother-in-law, my expression carefully crafted into one of profound, yet utterly false, sympathy. My lips curved into a gentle, almost regretful smile that belied the simmering storm within. I began, my voice pitched at a conversational, almost conspiratorial level, designed to draw them in. It's actually quite funny. Just the other day, Emily was expressing such deep, seated anxiety about the seating arrangements for the wedding. Emily, who had been idly, almost disdainfully, examining her perfectly manicured nails, as if the conversation held no interest for her whatsoever, suddenly stiffened. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her posture. Her mother-in-law, however, ever the keen observer of unfolding drama, merely raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her expression a mix of curiosity and mild amusement. "Oh," she prompted, her voice laced with an eager anticipation. I nodded, maintaining my casual, almost innocent tone, as if I were merely relaying a harmless piece of gossip. "Yeah," I continued, allowing the words to unfurl slowly, deliberately. She was really quite stressed about it. Kept saying she really didn't want certain people sitting too close to the head table. I let the words hang in the air, a tantalizing, ambiguous hook, allowing them to marinate, to ignite a spark of suspicion. Then I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice conspiratorially, as if I were about to impart the juiciest, most scandalous little secret, exclusively for her ears. Something about not wanting her pristine wedding photos ruined by Lee. I paused, feigning a momentary lapse of memory. tilting my head slightly as I turned to Emily, whose face had now gone several shades paler. "What was it, Emily?" I prompted, my eyes wide and innocent. "Oh, right." By someone's tacky dress sense, a collective hush, thick and immediate, descended upon the small, stunned group gathered around us. The casual chatter of Emily's friends abruptly ceased. Her mother-in-law's smirk, which had been so confidently etched onto her face moments before, vanished in an instant, replaced by a rigid, unblinking stare. "Excuse me," she hissed, her voice a low, dangerous rumble. Emily's face, already drained of color, now took on a greenish pallor, her eyes darting between me and her new mother-in-law like a trapped animal. "Hey, Alex!" she spluttered, her voice a desperate, strangled whisper. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. "Oh," I continued, raising a finger to my lips in mock contemplation, as if a new, equally significant revelation had just occurred to me. "And remember how incredibly worried you were about the speeches. You were really stressed about what certain people—" I gave Emily's mother-in-law a pointed, unwavering look, ensuring she knew precisely who the certain people referred to would say. I paused, letting the implication sink in, relishing the hardening of Emily's MIL's gaze. "I believe your exact words were," and I quote, "if she gives a speech, I swear to God, I'll lose my mind. She's so embarrassing. She'll probably try to make the whole thing about herself." Emily's MIL's expression darkened, the last vestiges of her composed facade crumbling away, replaced by a chilling fury. A muscle twitched in her jaw. Emily let out a strangled, pathetic noise, a desperate, almost silent plea. She reached out, her hand shaking, attempting to grasp my arm, to physically pull me away from the precipice. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she pleaded, her eyes wide with a desperate, frantic terror. I smoothly pulled my arm away, pretending to be utterly bewildered by her sudden urgency. "Why?" I asked, my voice laced with mock confusion. "I thought we were having a family conversation. Since I'm not immediate family anymore, I figured I'd at least try to get involved somehow." The thinly veiled sarcasm hung heavy in the air, a poisonous vapor. Emily's MIL turned slowly to Emily, her eyes narrowing into dangerous slits, the silence in the hallway suddenly suffocating. "Is that true?" she demanded, her voice deceptively calm, yet vibrating with an underlying menace. Emily let out a nervous, utterly unconvincing laugh, shaking her head so vigorously her veil shifted precariously. "No, of course not. Alex is just... Oh, and don't forget the bachelorette party," I gasped, smacking my forehead with exaggerated theatricality. "Silly me! How could I possibly not mention that?" I turned back to Emily's MIL, my gaze unwavering, my voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial murmur, ensuring every word would land with maximum impact. "You know, the one where Emily spent half the night absolutely complaining about you. Said she was counting down the days until she didn't have to fake nice anymore. Said she was only tolerating you because she didn't want to start her marriage off with drama. That was it. That was the kill shot, the final, decisive blow." The words hung in the air, shattering the last vestiges of pretense, ripping apart the carefully constructed facade of familial harmony. Emily's MIL's mouth fell open, her face a mask of utter, incandescent shock. My mother, who had been hovering awkwardly to the side, her face a carefully neutral mask until now, looked utterly horrified, as if she had just witnessed a public execution. My father, who, true to form, had been blissfully clueless and detached until this precise moment, actually took a physical step back, as if he desperately wanted to pretend he wasn't even remotely a part of this unfolding catastrophe. Emily's friends, the bridesmaids who had been giggling nervously moments before, began whispering amongst themselves, their eyes wide with scandal and disbelief, sending each other frantic, wide-eyed glances. Emily, meanwhile, looked as if she were literally about to spontaneously combust, her face a ghastly shade of white, then scarlet. Her lips were moving, forming silent, desperate pleas, but no sound, no coherent words were coming out. She was a silent scream, a portrait of utter, unmitigated horror. And then, Emily's MIL, recovering from her initial shock, turned on her with a swift, terrifying swiftness, her voice sharp and brittle with unadulterated fury.
"You ungrateful little brat!"
I had to bite the inside of my cheek so hard I almost drew blood, just to prevent a smug, triumphant smile from breaking through my carefully controlled expression. Because, oh, this was about to get good. Very, very good. You think you can just use me? Emily's MIL's voice was a sharp, angry rasp dripping with venom. After everything I've done for you, the money I put into this wedding, the favors I pulled, she gestured wildly, her perfectly manicured nails flashing, under the ambient light filtering from the ballroom, a furious, sweeping motion that encompassed the entire lavish setting. And this whole time, you've been running your mouth behind my back, Emily stammered, a pitiful, desperate sound. I didn't, I mean. But her words dissolved into unintelligible gibberish. Emily's smile then pivoted, her enraged gaze landing squarely on my parents.
"You knew about this?"
she demanded, her voice rising in pitch, laced with accusation.
"You raised her to be this kind of snaky!"
My mother looked as if she were seconds away from succumbing to a full, blown fainting spell, her hand pressed to her chest. "Of course not," she gasped, her voice trembling. "Emily would never." "Oh, don't even try, Mom," I cut in, shaking my head with a weary, knowing certainty, cutting off her weak attempt at damage control. "You absolutely knew. You just didn't care." I let out a fake, exaggerated sigh, a dramatic flourish to punctuate my point. "I mean, you did raise her to think she's the most important person in the entire world. Kind of makes sense she'd start treating everyone else like garbage, huh?" My mother's face twisted with a sudden, furious anger, her cheeks flushing a deep crimson. "Alex, stop it," she hissed, her voice low and menacing. "Why?" I asked, crossing my arms over my chest, meeting her furious gaze with an innocent, yet challenging stare. "Because I'm causing a scene." "Huh." Funny how that only matters when I'm the one speaking up. Didn't seem to be a problem when Emily literally shoved me out of the reception. Did it? By now, the spectacle had drawn a significant amount of attention. People were definitely staring, their conversations dying down, replaced by a growing hum of fascinated whispers. Heads were turning, necks craned to get a better view of the unfolding drama. Even the groom, who had been conspicuously absent from this entire exchange, finally wandered over, his brows furrowed in a perplexed, almost childlike confusion. His eyes scanned the agitated group, lingering on his furiously red-faced mother and his pale, trembling bride. "Oh, what's going on?" he muttered, his voice barely audible above the rising murmur of the crowd. Emily's MIL, seizing the opportunity to gain a sympathetic ear, rounded on him next, her voice sharp with unbridled fury. "What's going on?" she declared, jabbing a furious finger towards Emily, who looked as if she desperately wished the ground would open up and swallow her whole. "Is that your wife is a backstabbing little brat who's been insulting my family this whole time?" The groom blinked, his expression shifting from confusion to utter disbelief. "Wait, what?" Emily's MIL pressed on, relentless in her accusation. "She's been running her mouth about me for months, complaining about my dress, my speech, my very presence, saying she's only putting up with me until she doesn't have to anymore." The groom turned to Emily slowly, his eyes wide with a dawning horror, the implication of his mother's words finally sinking in. "Did you actually say that?" he asked, his voice strained, barely above a whisper. Emily shook her head furiously, a wild, desperate denial. "No, I mean, well, not like that," Emily's Emile scoffed, a short, contemptuous sound. "Oh, not like that? Oh, please!" And here I was, thinking you actually cared about this family? And just like that, irrevocably, officially, The wedding reception had transformed from a joyous celebration into a full-blown war zone. Emily's Mael and Emily were snapping at each other, their voices rising in pitch, sharp and angry. My mom, a picture of flustered panic, was trying desperately, futilely, to calm everyone down, her hands fluttering ineffectually in the air. My dad looked utterly miserable, his face contorted into a mask of acute discomfort, as if he longed to simply walk into the nearest body of water and disappear. The groom was still just standing there, frozen in place, looking utterly shocked, as if someone had just unexpectedly hit him in the face with a particularly heavy frying pan. Meanwhile, I, Alex, simply stood there, a quiet observer amidst the escalating chaos, watching the magnificent, glorious destruction unfold before my very eyes. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my champagne, the bubbles tickling my tongue, savoring the moment as if I were at the premiere of a particularly riveting Broadway play. And I'll be honest, with a clarity that surprised even myself, it was absolutely beautiful. The raw, unfiltered truth, finally bubbling to the surface, was a sight to behold. But the best part, the absolute, undeniable cherry on top of this magnificent, multi-layered disaster. I wasn't done yet. Emily's voice, already raw from her argument with her new mother-in-law, climbed another full octave, transforming into a piercing shriek that cut through the already agitated murmurs of the guests. Her hand, trembling visibly, shot out, gesturing wildly in my direction as she rounded on her new husband. "You believe her over me?" she demanded, her eyes wide and desperate, a mixture of disbelief and frantic fear. Her husband, to his credit, was still clearly struggling to process the bewildering, rapid fire unraveling of his wedding day. His jaw was clenched so tightly a muscle twitched visibly in his cheek, and his expression shifted, a tumultuous kaleidoscope of disbelief, utter embarrassment, and a dawning, terrible understanding. Guests, who had been attempting to discreetly avert their gazes, now openly stared, captivated by the raw, unfiltered drama unfolding before them. I don't even know what to say. "Emily," he muttered, his voice hoarse, as he rubbed his forehead in a gesture of profound stress. "I mean, did you say that stuff?" Emily scoffed, a sound of contemptuous dismissal, as if his question was beneath her. "I know, it was taken out of context," she insisted, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual indignant entitlement. I raised an eyebrow, a slow, deliberate gesture, my lips curving into a mocking smile. "Out of context," I drawled, allowing the words to drip with theatrical disbelief. "Oh, right. That classic excuse." I put on my best, most exaggerated mocking voice, complete with air quotes for emphasis. "Oh no,
I was just fainting."
I made elaborate air quotes with my fingers. "Oh no, I didn't mean it that way." My voice then flattened, losing all trace of humor, taking on a cold, unyielding edge. "Give it up, Emily. You got caught. And let's be honest, if I didn't say anything, you still wouldn't have cared. You would have continued to smile to her face and trash her behind her back without a single pang of conscience." Emily's Emiel, whose fury, far from subsiding, was only growing in intensity, turned her enraged gaze from Emily to my parents, her eyes blazing.
"You're just okay with this?"
she bellowed, her voice echoing with indignation. My mother's mouth opened and closed several times, like a fish gasping for air, utterly speechless. She looked utterly desperate, her eyes darting frantically around the room, searching for any lifeline, any phrase that might salvage this catastrophic situation. "We don't condone," she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy sound. "Oh, cut it, Mom," I said, waving a dismissive hand, unable to tolerate her pathetic attempts at damage control. "You absolutely knew she felt this way. You've indulged her entire life. And you still let her pretend to be the perfect daughter-in-law, the sweet, innocent bride." I clicked my tongue, a sound of derision. "Guess it's all about keeping up appearances, huh? Always has been." Emily screamed, a piercing, frustrated sound of pure rage. "You're ruining my wedding, Alex!" she shrieked, her voice cracking with fury and humiliation. I looked around dramatically, my eyes sweeping over the captivated, wide-eyed guests. "Oh, I'm ruining it," I asked, my voice dripping with mock innocence. "Sorry, my mistake. I didn't realize I was the one treating family members like dirt and trash." Talking the mother of the groom on her son's wedding day. I then turned back to the guests, many of whom were now openly staring, their expressions a mixture of shock, amusement, and morbid curiosity. "What do you guys think?" I asked, my voice carrying clearly across the increasingly silent reception area. "Who's really to blame here?" A few people, uncomfortable with being directly addressed, quickly averted their eyes, pretending to be deeply engrossed in the ceiling or their shoes, clearly not wanting to get involved in the unfolding family drama. But then, one of the bridesmaids, one of Emily's own bridesmaids, leaned in and whispered something to the woman standing next to her. And that woman, she let out a choked laugh, a sound that she tried to suppress, but failed spectacularly. The sound only served to fan the flames of Emily's rage.
"You think this is funny?"
she hissed, whipping towards them, her eyes blazing with furious indignation. The bridesmaid's lips twitched, a struggle between amusement and the desire to maintain some semblance of decorum. "I mean, kinda," she admitted, her voice a barely audible whisper. But the words were enough. Oh, this was getting good. Truly, fantastically good. Emily's hands curled into tight, shaking fists at her sides, her body trembling with suppressed fury. A volcano on the verge of eruption. But before she could explode again, before the spectacle could escalate further into a full-blown physical altercation, I decided it was time to wrap things up. Because, frankly, I was starting to get bored. The main act was over, and the encores were diminishing in entertainment value. I let out a dramatic, exaggerated sigh, shaking my head slowly, as if in profound disappointment. "Well," I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the lingering tension, "this has been absolutely lovely. Really, just a truly fantastic experience." My tone was laced with a thick, syrupy sarcasm that was impossible to miss. "But I think it's time for me to go," Emily scoffed, throwing up her hands in a gesture of exasperated dismissal.
"Fine, go,"
she spat, her voice thick with loathing. I grinned, a genuine triumphant smile this time. "Oh, don't worry," I said, the promise a threat. "I will." Then, with a casualness that completely belied the deliberate intention behind my actions, I turned toward the gift table. My eyes scanned the towering pile of expensive-looking presents, meticulously wrapped and stacked near the front, each one a testament to the guests' generosity and Emily's perceived importance. And there it was. My gift. The one I had spent weeks agonizing over, meticulously picking out, ensuring it was unique and thoughtful. The one that had required actual effort, genuine consideration, and perhaps most importantly, a significant sum of money. A small, self-satisfied smirk touched my lips. Emily, with a dawning horror that was almost comical, followed my gaze. Her eyes, already wide with rage, went even wider, her jaw dropping almost comically. "Alex." "No," she whispered, the single word a desperate plea. I strolled over, humming a light, innocent tune to myself, as if retrieving my own property from a coat check. With a slow, deliberate motion, I plucked the tastefully wrapped gift from the table. It was a rather expensive, high-end blender, something Emily had mentioned wanting. Emily's jaw dropped even further, hitting the floor with an audible click, if not literally, then certainly metaphorically. "Are you seriously taking it back?" she shrieked, her voice incredulous, as if I had just committed an unspeakable crime against humanity. I gave her a deadpan look, my expression utterly devoid of emotion. "Why would I leave it?" I asked, my voice calm, reasonable. "Apparently, I'm not real family, right? I'm just some detached acquaintance who has no place at the main table." I let out a fake, exaggerated gasp, clutching my chest dramatically.
Oh my God!
What if I accidentally contaminated it with my... I paused, leaning in conspiratorially. My servant germs. My eyes widened in mock horror. Wouldn't want to taint your precious married life, darling. Emily's face turned a truly dangerous shade of crimson, a furious, mottled red that clashed spectacularly with her pristine white dress.
You're such a child!
She spat, her words dripping with contempt. I shrugged, clutching the rather substantial box under one arm, feeling a profound, liberating lightness. Maybe, I conceded, a genuine smile now playing on my lips. But at least I'm not a fake lying. Two-faced brat who pretends to be sweet, while talking bad about people behind their backs am I. I turned briefly toward Emily's MEL, whose fury, though momentarily eclipsed by Emily's reaction, still hadn't fully subsided. I offered her a quick, almost friendly nod. Hey, Emile, I said, my voice carrying clearly. Good luck with this one. I give it a year. Emile, surprisingly, actually let out a short, sharp laugh. A sound of grim amusement. Emily screeched. A sound of pure, unadulterated outrage that echoed through the now stunned ballroom. I turned on my heel, clutching my prize, and began to make my way, with slow, deliberate steps, toward the exit. The tension behind me was so thick you could almost literally cut it with a knife. Palpable and suffocating. Guests, previously whispering, were now utterly silent, their eyes following my every move. The music, which had been playing softly in the background, had stopped completely, as if even the orchestra was too stunned to continue. The atmosphere had completely shifted, irrevocably transformed from one of celebratory joy to a full-blown, unmitigated disaster. And honestly, I loved it, every single, glorious second of it. As I reached the grand double doors leading to the outside, I paused, allowing myself one last, lingering look back at the chaotic, beautiful scene unfolding behind me. Emily was still locked in a furious argument with Emile, her face contorted with rage. My parents looked utterly mortified, pale and drawn, as if they wanted nothing more than to spontaneously combust and disappear into the very floorboards. The groom was still just standing there, frozen, his eyes wide and vacant, looking as though he was profoundly, agonizingly reconsidering every single life choice that had led him to this exact, terrible moment. And me? I gave a little wave, a small, triumphant gesture, a smug, satisfied smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Enjoy your perfect wedding, sis, I mouthed silently, my words a silent, scathing farewell. Then, without a single backward glance, I walked out. I didn't look back after I walked out of that absolute disaster of a wedding. I didn't need to. The feeling of pure, unadulterated satisfaction that washed over me was a powerful balm, soothing years of resentment and unspoken slights. I already knew, with an almost psychic certainty, that the damage had been done. And honestly, the impact was more profoundly satisfying than I could have ever, in my wildest dreams, imagined. The very moment those heavy doors shut with a soft, decisive thud behind me, sealing off the chaos I had unleashed, I let out a slow, deliberate breath, a physical release of years of pent-up frustration. I adjusted the weight of the wedding gift, my carefully chosen, now reclaimed high-end blender under my arm. Petty? Perhaps a little bit. Vindictive? Undoubtedly. Satisfying? Absolutely. Unequivocally, utterly satisfying. I drove home in a profound, almost blissful silence, letting the cool night air settle around me, a stark contrast to the burning inferno I had just left behind. My mind, far from resting, replayed every single detail of what had just transpired, like a perfectly edited highlight reel. My sister's high-pitched shrieks, the horrified, panicked expression on my mother's face, my father's shocked silence, Emile's absolute, righteous rage. It was all pure, unadulterated gold, a masterpiece of familial destruction. But even then, amidst the lingering glow of my triumph, a quiet, chilling certainty began to form in my mind. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that the true fallout, The long-term repercussions of my actions were only just beginning, and I was right. The very next morning, as the first rays of dawn filtered through my blinds, my phone, usually a quiet, understated companion, erupted into a cacophony of insistent notifications. It was quite literally flooded, a relentless barrage of missed calls, a cascade of unread texts, and a growing list of unheard voicemails. It was as if my entire family, who had so recently deemed me an expendable appendage, had suddenly, miraculously, remembered that I existed, and moreover, that I was a living, breathing entity capable of inflicting significant damage. My mother, bless her frantic heart, had left no less than 7 voicemails. Her voice, shifting wildly between desperate, pleading entreaties and outbursts of absolute, righteous fury, painted a vivid picture of her escalating panic. The first few were clipped. Urgent Alex.
What were you thinking?
You've humiliated your sister on the biggest day of her life!
Call me back now.
Then a rapid pivot to a saccharine, almost cloying tone. Alex, honey, please. We can talk about this. Just come over. Let's work this out, darling. Followed quickly by a return to indignation, tinged with a raw, emotional edgy. That was the most immature,
Selfish thing I have ever seen! I hope you're happy! I hope you enjoy destroying your sister's wedding!
Oh, I did, Mom. I really, truly, gloriously did. I savored that last voicemail, letting the echo of her outrage reverberate in my mind. But my sister's messages, those were even better, a true testament to her capacity for self-pity and blame. Her texts were a venomous cascade. It's over between us, Alex. OVR.
How could you do this?
You ruined EVR Tejin, and I can't even look at my wedding photos because of you.
Yo, Toki Beskio your gift. Are you serious? What kind of person does that?
I hate you. I really, really hate you. I grinned, a genuine, unbidden smile spreading across my face as I scrolled through the torrent of accusatory messages, sipping my morning coffee with a profound sense of peace. If Emily genuinely believed that a few angry, emotionally charged texts were going to somehow make me feel remorse or regret, she truly didn't know me at all. Her understanding of my character was as shallow as her concern for anyone beyond herself. But what truly caught my attention, cutting through the self-righteous indignation of my mother and sister, was a single text message from my dad, unlike the hysterical outpouring from the other two. His texts were short, simple, almost stoic. Call me when you have a moment. I hesitated for a long moment, my finger hovering over his number. Dad wasn't the type to get involved in family drama. He was the perpetual bystander, the silent observer. Usually, he let my mom and Emily run the entire chaotic show, allowing them to dictate the emotional landscape, while he stayed safely, almost comfortably, in the background, a silent, almost invisible presence. The mere fact that he was reaching out at all, that he was breaking his lifelong pattern of emotional detachment, meant that something truly significant, truly profound, was going on. He picked up after the second ring, his voice sounding tired, perhaps a little strained. Alex, he began, and then there was a long, heavy pause, filled with unspoken words and swirling implications. Finally, he let out a deep, weary sigh. Why would you do this? I snorted, a sharp, unladylike sound of derision. Wasn't my fault, I retorted, my voice firm. They lit the fuse. I just helped with the fireworks. He let out another sigh, this one even heavier than the last, and for a fleeting moment, I braced myself, expecting the familiar lecture, the predictable scolding, the parental finger wagging. But instead, to my utter astonishment, he chuckled. A low, almost tired sound, but unmistakably a chuckle. Yeah, he admitted, a hint of something resembling agreement in his tone. They kind of did. That caught me completely off guard. My brow furrowed in surprise. Wait, I asked, a faint tremor of disbelief in my voice. You agree with me? I didn't say that, he replied, his tone different now, quieter, imbued with a contemplative weight I rarely heard. But I saw what happened, and I saw how your mother and sister treated you. It wasn't right, Alex. Not at all. I leaned back in my chair, absorbing his words, letting them sink in. This was unprecedented. So what? I prompted, pushing him, needing to know the full extent of his perspective. You're the only one not blaming me. Another pause, a deliberate silence that spoke volumes. Not the only one, he finally said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more serious. Turns out, the wedding didn't just go back to normal after you left. The damage you had done, it had been irreversible. He recounted the escalating chaos that had continued long after my dramatic exit. Amile, Emily's mother-in-law, had completely lost her composure after I exposed Emily's true feelings. She had publicly chewed her out, right there in front of the remaining guests, demanding to know if what I had said was true, if her new daughter-in-law had truly harbored such contempt for her. And Emily, being Emily, had panicked, predictably. She had tried to lie, to backtrack, to play the innocent victim, to spin a narrative of misunderstanding. But apparently, Emile had already suspected something was off about her new daughter-in-law, had felt an undercurrent of insincerity. My little revelation, my carefully aimed kill shot, had been the absolute final straw. By the time the reception finally limped to a close, Emile had all but disowned Emily and the groom, her rage reaching a boiling point. The groom, my poor, clueless brother-in-law, had been absolutely furious. Apparently, he had been under the utterly misguided impression that Emily and his mother shared a wonderfully warm, almost idyllic relationship. He had no idea, not the slightest inkling, that Emily had been relentlessly trashing her behind her back for months, painting a picture of her as an insufferable, tacky nuisance. Finding out like that, in front of everyone, with such public humiliation. Yeah, Dad confirmed, not great for a brand new marriage. According to my dad, the groom and Emily had a colossal fight that very night, a screaming match that could be heard through closed doors. A huge one. As in, maybe we should rethink this entire marriage level of huge. And my parents, oh, they were caught right in the suffocating, emotional crossfire. My mom, ever the damage control specialist, had tried desperately to patch things up with Emile, to smooth over the ruffled feathers and mend the gaping chasm that had opened between the families. But Emile wasn't having any of it. She squarely blamed my mother for raising a spoiled, deceitful brat and had told her, point blank, that she didn't want Emily anywhere near her family ever again. It was a complete and total fallout, a nuclear implosion of familial relations. So what's the situation now? I asked, genuinely curious, a faint sense of satisfaction bubbling within me. Dad sighed again, the sound heavy with resignation. Emily is, well, she's not handling it well. At all, I rolled my eyes, a silent, internal gesture of shocker. Let me guess, I drawled. She's blaming me for everything. She thinks if I hadn't said anything, none of this would have happened, right? Dad confirmed it. She thinks if you just take the blame, maybe Emile will forgive her, and things can go back to normal. I couldn't stop the burst of laughter that escaped my lips, a genuine, uninhibited peal of amusement. Yeah, that's not happening, I stated firmly, unequivocally. I figured, Dad said, his voice surprisingly calm. And then, in a lower, almost conspiratorial voice, he added, and I don't think you should anyway. That actually made me pause, my laughter dying in my throat. Wait, I asked, genuinely surprised, seriously. You think I shouldn't apologize? I told you. Alex, he reiterated, his voice gentle but firm. I saw what happened. And honestly, maybe it's about time someone called her out. Someone finally held her accountable for her behavior. That meant more to me than I wanted to admit, a quiet validation that settled deep in my core. So what now? I asked, looking for the next chapter of this unfolding drama. Dad sighed again, a familiar sound. Your mom is still trying, bless her heart, to patch things up with Emile. But I don't think it's going to work. Emile is furious, Alex truly furious. The groom, he's barely speaking to Emily. And as for Emily, he hesitated, a rare moment of compassion creeping into his voice. Well, she's a mess. Good. I didn't say it out loud, but the thought resonated with a quiet, undeniable satisfaction. I wouldn't lie to myself about how I felt. My sister had spent years making me feel like an afterthought, systematically undermining my worth, treating me like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't belong, like I was an inconvenience, an obstacle to her effortless reign. And now she was finally, irrevocably, facing the stark, undeniable consequences of her own actions. It was about time. Anyway, Dad continued, pulling me from my reverie. I just thought you should know what's going on. Your mother will probably try to call you again. She can try, I said, shrugging, a sense of liberation washing over me. I'm not answering. Dad let out a short, almost rueful laugh. Can't say I blame you. And that was that. Our conversation ended, a quiet affirmation of a new, unexpected understanding between us. It's been a few weeks since the wedding now. A quiet, surprisingly peaceful few weeks. And honestly, I haven't spoken to my sister since that day. She still stubbornly refuses to take any responsibility for her own words and actions, still vehemently blames me for everything that transpired, and still, incredibly, expects me to somehow fix it all, to magically restore the illusion of her perfect life. But I won't. I absolutely will not. I don't regret what I did. Not for a single second. If anything, I'm profoundly, unequivocally proud of it. I finally stood up for myself. I finally spoke my truth. As for the marriage, well, let's just say that given the explosive start and the deep cracks that have already formed, I wouldn't be surprised if it doesn't last, if it dissolves under the weight of deceit and resentment. So what do you guys think? Was I too petty? Did I take it too far? Should I have just played along, swallowed my pride, and remained silently in the hallway, an invisible bystander at my own sister's supposed triumph? Or did my sister, the golden child, the perpetual main character, finally get exactly what she deserved? Let me know. I could certainly use a good laugh.